So now on to our panel discussion. So we're going to start by discussing some of the most successful marketing campaigns, as well as the not so successful ones, and what were the lessons learned from these, and also what marketing tech we used and challenges faced, and much more. So our panelists today, so we've got Kiaran Saunders, Managing Director of eco-friendly and natural skincare brand Balance Me. JC Oliver, co-founder of Recast, where you can gain instant access to exclusive live and on-demand sporting action. Hannah Parvaz, head of marketing at Uptime, where you can access thousands of life lessons extracted from the world's best books, courses, and documentaries packed into 5-minute knowledge hacks. And Matt Payne, marketing consultant and former head of digital at price comparison website Money Supermarket. So let's get stuck into the questions. And again, if you would like to ask the panel anything, please use the Q&A section, which we'll answer at the end. Okay, so Hannah, if you could kick us off, it would be great to hear what has been your most successful marketing campaign to date and why.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in as well. And all the talks previously were amazing. I was watching very intently. So, I mean, to begin with, our biggest successes in marketing, I feel, come from careful iterations on previous wins. And with Uptime, recently it's just been hit after hit because it's such an incredible product that it's so easy to market. But I'd say most recently, our biggest success is getting our full comms flow live for our onboarding. So that's emails and push notifications, which has boosted up our conversion. So from install to actually paying by whole percentage points just from doing this, and also dramatically increased our engagement. So I know we might want to be talking about ads as well. So in terms of ads, I think that tapping into messaging of what people want to achieve has found the biggest successes. So having messaging around, for us, becoming more interesting, having better conversations, even having better relationships, and really tapping into those things, that those kind of social jobs to be done that people have. So speaking to our customers, understanding their needs, and then reflecting them back to our audience has really helped.
Brilliant. A lot of stuff that was relevant to what Ruby was talking about earlier, actually. And Matt, I'd also be interested to hear your views. Can you relate to that, or perhaps you've got a slightly different example?
I do have a slightly different example. I think one of the biggest things, I'll talk about success really, which was from a couple of years ago for us, which was actually, this is in a world related to gambling when I was formerly working with Roast, an integrated campaign that worked with a gambling company where we created an asset for them. It became their second biggest page that they had on the website, following their brand, from nothing to a monster of a page. The beauty of it, though, was the ability for it to provide value. So that's why it ticked so many boxes. That's why it actually got up to the level of traffic that it did so quickly. But also it created a content web, which we were able to therefore relate to a lot of different conversations from social through email, fulfilling a whole host of attributes there. So for us, it was about connecting all those dots and making sure that you actually treat all the channels that you've got available as one, and not a silo solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure loads of people can relate to that. And I think it's also really important to talk about failures as well, because arguably we learn more from them. So not to say that you guys had more failures, but just to get you into the conversation. JC, have you got any examples of any maybe failures that you could talk about and what you learned?
I like the way you came to me first for the failure rather than the success. Well, yeah, firstly, just great talks earlier. Really appreciated some fantastic insight into them. And yeah, to your point, look, failure is great because you do learn more, because you tend to focus around what you think didn't work. And it's interesting because a lot of successful companies, when you look at their strategies, business growth, marketing, are actually very similar to the strategies of companies that don't succeed. And when you try, and we normally champion the best companies. Oh my God, they did this. This was the marketing campaign, and that equaled this, and that was success. But when you go and look at the failures, a lot of them do the same type of things. And so it normally comes down to something that is very small, very unique, and very particular that either defines what is a success and defines a failure. And I think it really is down to you as to setting those metrics at the very start as to what can constitute a success or constitute a failure. My belief is that if you can move someone's heart and mind, even one person, around a campaign, then that's success for that person on the other end. It might have cost you a lot of money to convince someone and change their mind and buy your product or invest in your service. But it really is down to the metrics that you said at the beginning. And rule I always use is the pirate metric, which I think Dave McClure championed, which is the R. So acquisition, awareness, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. If you look at those 6 things and say, right, how are we tracking against those? Are we hitting them? Then you can define success and failure by that. But when it comes to failure, probably the worst kind that I never really have any time for is great ideas that never get out the gate. There's a very famous quote by the Cockney Adland guy, Dave Trott, who always used to say, if it didn't run, it ain't advertising. No point coming up with an idea that wasn't out there in the public domain or out there in the wild. And I think the biggest failure is if you've got a great idea, not getting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kiaran, is there anything you could share with us from Balance Me or even AccuWeather, which you're involved with as well?
Hi, El. Yeah, and thanks to everyone before. I kind of agree with JC, but for us, I think honestly, as a challenger brand, as we see ourselves, we had great success in social as a founder-led engagement strategy where we created loads of lives, and the 2 founders did loads of Facebook and Instagram and all sorts of stuff. It worked really well, but the minute we went to paid social, we found it really tough. And that was because we moved from that sort of honest, open engagement to product shots and discounts. And I think one of our difficulties is finding a way to make paid social work and trying to bring customers in through that mechanic. And it's hard work. I mean, the other thing I would say is it's about quality, and it's very easy. Everyone's got an iPhone 13 or whatever version of phone you are. It's quite tempting to think that with social, you can get away with handheld photography and avoid certain amount of creative cost. And to some extent in that social environment you can, but I do think you have to invest in quality. And that's something we're looking at, is paying the big bucks for the decent photographers to do professional versions of our content, because it cuts through. And so one of our failures was creating content that just didn't ping and didn't pop. And when you look back on it, I mean, we had one which was a white product on a white background where you couldn't really read the text on the product. I mean, it sounds obvious, but that was just a poor shot that we didn't invest and pay attention to the detail on. And the reality is we've spent money on that ad and it's failed. And that's something that we're really trying to up the bar in, is investing in the quality of what we're trying to put out there and trying to elevate our brand through that quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate your honesty on that. And kind of going down the theme of people and tech, it would be really good to know whether you've got any insights you could share around how has technology enabled you to produce marketing campaigns and help you in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so just from my side, I think the interesting thing with technology is that we use guys like you, Roast, to do all of that technology, media buying type stuff. But what has become more apparent recently is what we're trying to do is make sure that the people we attract and bring in at vast expense, we keep, that the user journey is really carefully thought through. Some of what Ruby was talking about is absolutely about it. We spend so much on getting them, tens of pounds, maybe even £100 to acquire someone. And then we don't talk to them for 3 months, and we don't personalize how we're talking to them. So we're actually investing in our tech stack to look after our customers. So we have software now, or we're about to launch different types of software that enables us to manage and segment groups and talk to them at different levels. We're bringing in loyalty, an enhanced loyalty scheme that will enable us to retain them and look after them. So from that side, it's kind of internal tech, but really it's there to make the most out of the money we're spending externally, because the most expensive people we can attract are new customers. And when we bring them in, we really want to keep them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And there's a common thread, isn't there, here across all the answers? It's really about engagement and personalization. So many businesses now, they're scrutinizing marketing budgets. So I'd be really interested to know, how would you go about marketing on a shoestring? If anyone wants to take that, open the floor.
Well, I'll give you my. Sorry, go on, Hannah.
I was just going to say that I absolutely think that there are loads of ways to get started on a shoestring budget, and some of the companies I've worked with in the past have just been completely bootstrapped and had absolutely no money to spend. So I think that some of the elements which actually last the longest are the ones that you're not necessarily even paying for on an ongoing basis. So social media, sometimes press, your website, other than kind of upkeep fees, your emails, your customer nurture and things like that, and building your brand as a whole and forming relationships with your audience. Ads are really great to, bring people in at scale, but that ads go away, like they don't last, and you can see that with incrementality. So if you can create a brand that people really connect with, and also just a product that people love, then you're a company that people will want to talk about. So word of mouth is always going to be the best way to grow. So, my advice around that would be, don't forget the value of your customers, look after them, and, reiterating what everyone has said today, like nurture them, endeavor to give them the best experience possible, because people are really the blood in your business's body.
Absolutely. So invest in the product, and it makes the marketing a lot easier. JC, what were you going to share?
Well, yeah, I love Hannah's point on talkability. If you know who you are and what you want to do, stopping an ad campaign here and there is not going to drastically affect your business in the long run. But I think the trouble that marketing has, top to bottom, in the stack, from brand all the way down to operations, is that it's still not regarded as strategic. It's still a tactical piece in a lot of companies' minds. And the strategy is product, big ideas and R&D and innovation, and then the tactical is sales, marketing, distribution, for instance. And so because it's generally viewed as tactical, it's easy to say, all right, let's just rip that out and reduce the spend. And today, when we think about it from a growth perspective, product, and just as we're saying, the product itself is marketing. And so it's not just easy to go, right, we're going to stop doing this, or we're going to stop doing that, and it's going to save us money. There's so many other metrics that you have to think about in terms of brand, in terms of product, and that engagement piece, that I just don't think it's easy to say, right, let's switch it off. And to Hannah's point, what if you are working on a shoestring as a brand or as a product and service? There are a number of ways that you can do things, and the classic case I always think about is Dropbox. They were trying to develop and sell their service, and then as soon as they said, right, what do? We sell storage. Great, let's give storage away. And they did, and then that elevated the product and the brand to a point where it became indispensable, certainly to a lot of creative people. So you can work on a shoestring, and I think the other point I'm making here is don't automatically switch off your marketing budget, because whilst it might seem like an easy thing to do, it can have detrimental effects in the long run.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I'm flipping that on its head. I'm going to come to you, Matt, specifically because price comparison websites, we all know it's a hugely competitive industry, sizable marketing budgets. So be really interested to hear, what are some of the challenges like marketing teams face, kind of the larger marketing teams face, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, I think you've got to put into context two things for us. So we work in a hugely competitive market, which is also pretty much commoditized. So the one first starting point, which I would make the same reference in terms of when you're a startup on a shoestring, is you've got to fundamentally start with your audience. Understand your audience. You'll know how and who you target, and targeting will only get you so far. I think you've got to try and stay away from hyper targeting, because you need to try and keep filling that bucket. And then the other side of it, really, for us, I think in terms of what we try and do, is try to do something a bit different. if we're all doing the same things, and there's a great example from the likes of Noel Mack, who's the chief brand officer at Gymshark. He said, you know, if you're going to take on the likes of a Nike, you know, you've got to do something different. You've got to really go out there and try something different. So look at different opportunities. And that's what we try and do, is try and put a different lens on an opportunity that we can try something different that fits our space that maybe isn't conventionally built for our space. So that's what we'll be kind of testing and trying in 2022.
Nice. And
can I just build on that, actually,
yeah.
just because I think it's a great point. There's a company called Carcredibility. I'm sure many of us own cars, and if the nebulous haze that is buying cars and understanding how to get different APRs, and they buy at a different point in the cycle. So most CarWow, Carzoo, all of these car companies, they all buy as you're coming to the end of your deal, and so your acquisition cost at that point is going to be high because you're fighting against all the other competition. And what Carcredibility does is you can refinance your car at any time in that cycle. And so their acquisition costs are much earlier in the purchase cycle and are much cheaper, because then no one's fighting at that point in the cycle to buy that customer. But because their product is change out any time, not just at the end of your deal, they've approached it in a slightly different way. And so their acquisition costs are low. So yeah, it's a very, very good point. And it's just about finding, again, what is distinctive and different about how you want to do business versus others.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example. It brings it to life. And I just want to end, just conscious we've got about 5 minutes left before we can open the floor to questions. In the theme of shaping the future, how do you develop talent and support your teams? Open to the floor.
I'm happy to jump in again, but Matt, do you want to go ahead? Well, I was going to just say I love working with new talent. I'm always trying to find kind of new and exciting people to add in. I think, you know, it's especially important to work across different ages and demographics and generations to get different perspectives. But within Uptime and externally, I spend a lot of time mentoring. I teach on an accelerator, and I give back a lot in those ways to try and uplift the industry as a whole. And mostly because there's kind of no support, like one-on-one support to help you answer your questions. So the platform I mentor on, called Growth Mentor, you can just sign up. You get one-on-one access to mentors from all over the world in all different specialities, and you know, it's fantastic. So go ahead, Matt.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure. I was just going to add relatively that your team's going to be made up of a different amount of strengths. And I think one of the things to do is really invest in developing the strengths that they have naturally and try and find balance within a team. And then on top of that, I think what you've got to look at doing is investing in their wider knowledge and growth. So building a bigger, wider skill set allows them to think differently rather than thinking in the same competitive space that everyone else does.
Brilliant. And I think the themes there in both of your answers are around diversity. And I think, yeah, the strength of the team will always outweigh the strength of an individual, and get the more kind of diverse perspectives you can get. And as to your point, Matt, looking at people's strengths as opposed to their weaknesses and really honing in on them will be your best bet. Fab. Okay, great. So I want to open up now if there's any kind of questions, Q&A, if anyone would like to ask from the audience. Oh, there's one just come in. So what's been your most important marketing lesson learnt?
I'll give you an example from our side. I think we have a tendency. We have had a tendency to try and support every initiative we're doing internally to the customer. So we're a product-led business, so we launch products. Clearly, if we were a big business, we would massively support every product launch and every initiative. But the reality is that we can't do that. So I think what we have learned is that we have to focus in on the ones that we believe will really move the dial for us in terms of whatever KPIs we're trying to achieve, and actually have the bravery to let some go and let some live in a different way, or let some things launch in a quieter way, because otherwise we're spreading our valuable resources too thinly, and we're also putting too much strain on a small organization to constantly turn the wheel. So that's one thing, not to mention the fact if you do too many in the social and pay-per-click environment, the campaigns never get out the learning phase, and you end up like just not finding that successful piece of advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. So focus on less, but go deeper.
Yeah.
Great. And then quite a big, broad question. So what do you think are going to be the biggest trends in marketing that are going to come in 2022? JC, you're unmuted.
Am I unmuted? Oh, I didn't know I
God,
was
do you
muted.
want to answer?
Well, I think there's going to be quite a few this year. It's going to be an interesting one coming off the back of the changes from COVID, and we're all sitting on this Zoom call, which is touching on a number of different areas. But I think headless CMS, headless e-commerce is an interesting area. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention the metaverse, as we have done today. But it's interesting because I feel like with the metaverse, it's one of those terms that's kind of your avatar that exists in the world. Like everything we talked about today, everything that John talked about, the metaverse is anywhere that you can meet that is virtual, right? So Discord as a platform is in the metaverse. Voice as a platform exists, and Alexa exists in the metaverse. We just tend to run to this, we need to build an avatar in a virtual world. I think it's going to be very difficult for brands to try and understand how to play in that space. So, you can take other steps to get there, and it doesn't just necessarily mean to be that. And the final one, which I think is really interesting and that they've looked at, and we kind of touched on it with voice, is synthetic media. So there was a great piece last year. David Beckham did a face to camera, and he ended up then speaking many different languages. I think we're all very aware that David Beckham can only speak 2 languages, English and Cockney. And so he spoke Chinese, he spoke Indian, and it was totally, well, I wouldn't say it was, you couldn't see it with the naked eye, but I think that area of visual image and oral understanding and bringing those two together in the synthetic space will be a very interesting play for brands, and also IP, because you can quite easily use my face and overlay, I don't know, Colin Farrell. Don't know why he's coming to my mind. But what does that mean for that IP? So I think there'll be some interesting endeavors into synthetic media.
Fab. Thank you. And unless there's any more, I think that will conclude our Shaping the Future event. So thank you very much for joining, and we hope you found the information shared of value. So we'll be sending out a follow-up with all the insights from today. So don't worry if there's anything that you wanted to keep note of, we'll send you that. And going forward, we really hope that our Shaping the Future events can take place in person, so we can all enjoy a chat together and a glass of something sparkly. And yes, so if you want to be in our email alias, and if you're not a client and you want to know about these events going forward, then please do email us at marketing@tpgroup.com. We also release regular industry white papers again, so if you want to make sure you're on a hot list and get these straight to your inbox, then please do reach out. And thank you again for joining, for all our speakers and panelists today.